Constitution of the Philippines, the compare and contrast. The 1897 Constitution, 1899 Constitution, 1935 Constitution, and the 1943 Constitution. The 1973 and 1987 Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines.
The 1897 Constitution of Biak-na-Bato, it was signed on November 1, 1897. The Biak-na-Bato Constitution provided for the establishment of a Supreme Council that would serve as the highest governing body of the Republic. It is also outlined certain basic human rights such as freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and the right to education. The Constitution of Biak-na-Bato, it is drafted by Isabelo Artaco and Felix Ferrero and was based on the first Cuban institution. It is known as the Constitution Provisional de la República de Filipinas. This constitution is composed of Government for the State Delaware Preamble and the Republic of the Philippines Article 3 Bill of Rights. In comparison with the Constitution of 1987, or also known as the 1987 Freedom Constitution, the 1987 Constitution largely preserved the pre-authoritarian political system with a strong presidency and bicameral legislature. It resurrected many provisions from past Philippine Constitution and is viewed by some scholars as undermining the revolutionary potential of the People Power movement. The 1987 Constitution established a representative democracy with power divided among three separate and independent branches of government. Number 1, Executive. It is the power to enforce and administers the laws. Number 2, Bicameral Legislature is one in which two assemblies share legislative power. Number 3, Judiciary, responsible for interpreting and applying a country's laws in particular cases. Both constitution focuses on how the government serve and protect its people in order to have a peace and controllable country, to have equality in terms of being a citizenship of the Philippines. The political constitution of 1899, informally known as the Malolos Constitution, was the constitution of the First Philippine Republic. It was drafted and adopted by the First Philippine Republic, which lasted from 1899 to 1901. During the American occupation, the Philippines was governed by the laws of the United States of America. Again, the 1897 Constitution of Biak-na-Bato, wherein it established democratic republication government with three branches, which are the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. The difference between this constitution, in 1897, the Tejeros Convention was convened and the Constitution of Biak-na-Bato drafted and ratified. Felipe Buencamino, a lawyer and a revolutionary leader, was one of the writers of the Malolos. The parliamentary terminologies used in this constitution are different to the more usual. The Malolos Republic was the culmination of the Philippine Revolution, which has come to be known as the Constitution of Biak-na-Bato.
1897 compare and contrast with 1899 and 1935. 1897 and 1899 compare or the comparison of two constitutions. It is signed on November 18, 1897. The Biak-na-Bato Constitution. It provides of the creation of Supreme Council to serve as the supreme body of the Republic's government. It also describes some fundamental human rights such as freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and the right to education. While the Malolos Constitution on 1899 specifically provide of safeguards against abuse and enumerated the national and individual rights, not only of the Filipinos and of the aliens. The next is the contrast. On 1897 and the 1899 Constitution. In 1897, the Tejeros Convention was covered and the Constitution of Biak-na-Bato draft and ratified, a lawyer and revolutionary leader, was one of the writers. The Malolos, the preliminary terminologies used in the Constitution, are different to the more usual. Okay, next is 1897 and 1935 compare or comparison. The comparison between the 1935 and 1897's Constitution. The 1935 Constitution is all featured a political system virtually identically to the American one and became cooperative, while the 1897 provide of the establishment of a Supreme Council that would serve as the highest governing body of the Republic. These two constitutions are all about politics and government. The last is the contrast of 1897 and 1935. The difference between 1935 and 1897, the 1935 Constitution is all about a president to be elected the large of a 4-year term. It is subject to one re-election. And then the 1989 is all about the freedom of the religions, human rights, and also about education.
Good day, everyone. So I wanted to share what was the 1897 Constitution and 1943. What is their comparison? So in 1897 Constitution, it is established a democratic. So it is having freedom about something. And in 1943, it is also talks about the independence of Filipinos during September 4, 1943. And let's go to the contrast. So the preamble of the 1943, during 1943 they have also a preamble, which is they wanted also to lead free a national existence to proclaim independence. So in 1897 Constitution, it is talks about the Biak na Bato. They were talking about when were Biak na Bato signed, and it was on November 18, 1897. So it is about the right of education, that everyone should have be uneducated. Now let's talk about the 1973 Philippines Constitution and the 1987 Philippine Constitution. So their comparison is about the principles or the laws. It focused about having a peace, equality, justice, freedom, cooperation, and amity or unity with all the nation. The 1987 Constitution established a representative democracy with power divided among three separate and independent branches of government, such as the executive, bicameral legislature, and the judiciary. So let's talk about the 1973 Constitution, and in contrast, let's talk about the 1973 and 1897 Constitutions. So their difference is that the 1973 Constitutions composed of a preamble and 17 articles that provides from presidential to parliamentary system of the government, while in the 1897 Constitution, it contains 18 articles that shall give priority to education, science and technology, arts, culture and sports, and so on. While in 1973, it focuses about the special treatment for disabled persons, related to the rehabilitation, the development of ourselves, self-reliance, the integration, how can we maintain our society, and yeah, it is talks about the establishing a good society and a country.
I'll give you some brief description about Malolos Constitution. In year 1899, the Malolos Constitution was the first Philippine constitution and the first republican constitution in Asia. Malolos Constitution, the political association of all the Filipinos, constitutes a nation, whose state is called the Philippine Republic. The Philippine Republic is free and independent. Sovereignty resides exclusively in the people. The comparison of these two constitutions is to have our own government that can dictate decisions from our country. The 1899 Constitution, aka Malolos Constitution, was drafted by Filipino revolutionaries where some few Filipino leadership fought the Spanish regime. The 1935 Philippines Constitution was an offshoot of the Tydings-McDuffie Law of 1934 granting the Philippine Island complete independence to take effect on July 4, 1946, a month after the transitional period of 10 years under the Commonwealth government. These two constitutions show that there is an awareness of our rights, so it was given attention so that the meaning of the right in our country is not lost. The Constitution specifically provided for safeguards against abuses and enumerated the national and individual rights not only of the Filipinos and of the aliens. The legislative powers were exercised by the Assembly of Representatives composed of delegates elected according to law, while in the 1943 Constitution enumerates the duties and rights of the citizen, requires the government to develop Tagalog as the national language, and stipulates that 1 year after the termination of the Great East Asia War of the World War II.
The 1899 and 1935 comparison is to compare the two constitutions. Both constitution has its goal of speak to our nation. The contrast between the two is the 1899 placed limitation on unsupervised freedom of action by the chief executive, which would hamper rapid decision making, while the 1935 speaks of our nation's decision to establish a political order based on democratic principle of representation, accountability, and the rule of law. Now, the 1899 and 1943, both constitution has only have the same goals in protecting their own rights and duties to the nation, but may differ in other aspects. The contrast for these two constitutions is the 1899 was known for the establishment of democratic republican government, while the 1943 enumerates the duties and rights of the citizens. To conclude, all the constitutions is all about the duties and rights of the citizens, and the rights not about the Filipinos but also the aliens in the Philippines. It helps the individuals to achieve what their own and to achieve their own rights with the right treatment to other people.